Bodies and brains. We all have them. They're different, but we own them, right? What happens when our bodies and our brains become compromised? What if our bodies were no longer ours? What can we control and what can't we control? What if our bodies were no longer ours? What if someone else owned a part of you or controlled your mind? Ask yourself this: who does your body and your brain belong to? Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Alright. We're going to go on to the second story in the Body and Brain series. I'm just going to say this before I start. Now, the central figure in this is a political figure. And I want to just make clear straight away that it has nothing to do with this man's politics. This is not a political podcast. I'm not looking to incite any arguments about what this person stood for or his party stood for. It's just about his body. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Okay, so in 1865, arguably the most well-known man on the planet sits down to watch some theatre. He is sitting in the Ford Theatre in Washington. He's watching a play. Now, this is no ordinary theatre goer. This isn't Joe Blogs off the street. This isn't Sally Blogs off the street. Should really stop saying Joe Blogs. It's very male dominated, that statement. No, this is in fact Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of America. A controversial figure, some will say, who had talked about abolishing slavery, giving voting rights to the black community who previously hadn't been allowed to vote, and had had a really interesting life. Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler at some point in his life. I did not know that until I started looking at this. Fascinating. But like one of those like old-timey wrestlers. You know what I mean? Like kind of like guys in the sort of singlet thing that wrestlers wear. Although I suppose kind of they still wear them now, but yeah, his was like the 1865 version of that. You know the kind of look. I mean, now favoured a lot by gay men as quite a fetishy look. So I hear. Anyway, Lincoln had been a champion wrestler and then had left it all behind for politics. And then he started growing some facial hair, wearing big hats, generally got himself a bit of a vibe. Do you know what I mean? He was kind of the hipster of his day. Anyway, right, that aside, that's what he looked like, that's what he was all about. Back to the theatre. Actor and part-time spy John Wilkes Booth was the man responsible for the assassination of Lincoln. He snuck in to the theatre box where Lincoln was sitting with his wife Mary, and he shot Lincoln in the head. As soon as this happened, he fled. And it wouldn't be long before he was caught, but in the meantime it meant that Abraham Lincoln, he didn't die instantly. Instead, he sat in that chair while doctors ran around trying to save his life. He sat there upright in that seat. He gets taken by doctors across the street to another building. And it's in this other building he would stay in a coma for 8 hours before being pronounced dead the following morning. So, shock and disbelief across America, of course. Right, now that's the bit of the story we know, right? We know that. It's the what happens next that I didn't know about. And I just want to tell you because I think it's so fascinating. Maybe this gets taught in American schools. I don't know. You might all be like, yeah, I know this one. But I really didn't know this is what happened. And I just think it's so interesting. So, 1865, embalming had kind of been on the rise. It was starting to become something that doctors and morticians were using more and more. Before embalming fluid was a thing that people used to use arsenic to preserve bodies, and it didn't really work. So they had to quickly try and sort of find other things. What was happening was a lot of soldiers were coming back from the Civil War. Dead soldiers were coming back, and their families, they wanted them preserved in some way that they could give them a burial or see them again. And actually they were like, we're going to need some kind of fluid that actually preserves bodies. Lincoln himself was a big champion of it being used. So various people had their hands on embalming fluid, and everyone was kind of trying their own recipe for it. I don't think recipe is the right word, but you know what I mean. People were trying their own method of making it. There was one guy who actually discovered that he could make it from homemade bloody things that he had and various bits and pieces, or a version of it. And what he would do is, when the dead soldiers' bodies would return back to the town that he lived in, he would embalm them with his own special fluid and then pop them in a shop window. I mean, what? Can you imagine? You're walking down the street, you're like, I'm just going to go to the butcher's. Right, and then what I'll do is I'll just pop to the baker's. I could really do with getting myself a new needle and thread to sew my buttons on. And then I'll pop to the dead body shop. Weird. Very weird. So, back to Lincoln. A decision gets made instantly that Lincoln's body must be preserved as soon as possible. And they wanted it preserved for a very particular reason. It was going to be taken on tour. His dead body was to go on tour throughout America to give people the chance to view it and to mourn his death. A touring corpse, if you will. Like, the way they were seeing it was a procession through major towns and cities where people could come and pay their respects. Okay. Just FYI here, everyone. That's totally what I want when I die. I want my own corpse tour. Yeah? I want to be taken through the streets and mourned publicly. So if I could just leave you guys with that to organise, that would be great. Thanks. So anyway, the steps that have to be taken before the tour can be organised is the doctors have to drain his body of blood via his neck, and they have to inject him with embalming fluid. So as this is happening, there's also an argument about his skull. And people are asking, should we be opening the skull of Abraham Lincoln and actually taking his brain out? Should that also be preserved? Why? Well, people believed that, he's got this fine mind, and actually we could study it. We could see what the brain of Abraham Lincoln could tell us about thought and about choice and about, lots of different things, but there was a lot of people not happy with the idea that you were just going to whip his brain out of his head. So there was a bit of an argument for a while. I'm not sure I want my brain taken out, by the way, when my corpse tour is happening. I don't know if I want you to take my brain out. I mean, me and Abraham Lincoln have got a lot in common, we both like facial hair, both want a death tour, but there are some differences between us. I'm not a wrestler. I mean, that's it. I mean, I might own a wrestling singlet. Who knows? No, I don't. I'm kidding. Or am I? Now, okay, so for the moment they decide, right, do you know what we'll do? We'll just leave his brain in his head. Fine. So they dress his body up in a new suit. They arrange his face into a smile. And the journey of more than 2,000 miles will begin. Now, before he sets off, it's important to say this. There is a vault under the Congress building in Washington where it's always believed that he would go. But you see, this idea was cooked up when he was alive. And now that he's dead, there's suddenly a change and everyone's like, no, instead let's take him on tour and then we can later, we'll figure out later where to bury him. So for 5 days while they prepare the cities they're going to go to, what's the route, how we're going to get him there, his body sits in the White House and it can be visited. And it is by nearly 30,000 Americans who make the trip to see the dead president. But the time comes for the journey of his body to begin. 2 weeks is how long this is scheduled to last. Now, was the embalming fluid that they had for Abraham Lincoln the best? No, you've got to remember this was yieldy. This was yieldy embalming fluid. It was early days. So they're just going to have to hope for the best, really, with this. So they start the journey and they decide that they're going to kick it off in Springfield, Illinois, the same place that The Simpsons is set. Why Springfield? Well, this is where he was born. This is the town that he grew up in before he moved, when politics took over his life. So they think, okay, it's a good idea. Let's take him back to his birthplace. Now, they make this decision, and this is just, I don't know about this. Abraham Lincoln had tragically lost one of his sons at a young age. His son Willie had died age 6 from disease that couldn't be treated. And they decide that when they're going to take Abraham Lincoln on his death tour, they're also going to dig up his 6-year-old son's body to travel with his dad. Okay. I mean, what's really interesting to note here is that Abraham Lincoln's wife Mary wanted none of this. His wife Mary was like, no, I don't want my dead son dug up. And I don't want my husband's body paraded through the streets of America. I want a quiet, private, family funeral. I don't want him treated like Elton John in fucking tour in Las Vegas. But I'm afraid she gets overruled. They put him in his presidential car and off the tour starts. So the remains, they're taken to Springfield. They go from Springfield to Baltimore. He's taken from Baltimore to New York. And in New York, his body stays for 23 days in the one place open to the public. This tour was meant to last 2 weeks. It's going on and on. His body is beginning to deteriorate really badly. His skin is darkening, and doctors and morticians, they're on hand, of course, to try and help, make him still look as human as possible. But let's be honest, this is a mess. We've got a body that's been dead for weeks and it's travelling city to city. It's not exactly going to look great, is it? So huge crowds are coming out everywhere to throw flowers at the passing car, take their hat off when the cars pass. And after 36 days, the tour comes to an end. And now, the battle for where his body should be buried begins. So in Springfield, his hometown, the people who live here, they say, right, what we want to do is we want to build a whole new cemetery. A big, old, fancy place and bury him there. And Mary, his wife, is like, no. No, I just want him buried in the normal Springfield cemetery. But the politicians who are involved, they want something different as well. They want him buried in Washington, not in his hometown. So you've got three completely different opinions on what should happen with his body, and it's a mess. So what they decide to do, because they can't quite decide where his body should go just now, is they're going to place him into a vault in Springfield whilst they decide what to do. And it's whilst they place him in this vault that the plans to build the giant mausoleum, I never know how you say that word, mausoleum, to be in Springfield. That's when they decide they're going to build this, which would eventually become the Abraham Lincoln Memorial. So he's in the vault, underground, and the giant memorial is yet to be built. Now, I'm no builder, right? I'm not on a building site every day of my life, and neither am I a mausoleum builder. But I can tell you this, these things don't get done quickly. And this certainly does not get done quickly. It takes years to build this. Years and years and years. So, while this is going on, while they're trying to build this thing and his body's in a vault, his wife Mary steps in and says, look, enough is enough. I've had enough of this. I want him buried in the private cemetery in a very small ceremony in town, just family. And actually Mary gets what she wants here. People give in to her wishes because they can start to see, actually now, do you know what, this is a bit ridiculous, like his body's been kind of moved about from place to place, maybe we should actually just give his wife what she wants. It doesn't stop them building the memorial. They're still going to build that. And the people in Washington, they still want his body. So he's taken from the vault. They have their family ceremony. And that should be it. That should be it done. But it's not. Because after 7 years of building, the mausoleum is finally finished. So, Abraham Lincoln is dug up from his private funeral place and he's taken to the memorial. The decision being, this is going to be it, right? This is his final resting place because he can be here forever. He can be here till the end of time, basically. And this is where people can come and visit him. And that's only right for a man who was the 16th American president and, you know, changed so much about America. Now here's the problem. They've taken years and years building this memorial, and they're about to discover a major fuck up. The space that they have built to put his coffin in is too small. When the builders have built the memorial, they've not left enough space for his coffin. So yeah, it's this great big fucking structure. It's amazing. Thousands will come to see it. Yeah, great. But you've not actually measured the right space for the coffin. I mean, how these things happen, genuinely, I don't know. I mean, they fascinate me in a way. And please, right, I'm asking, this is a plea. If you know of any stories of these kind of things where something is years in the planning and then at the last minute they discover it's a major balls up, please can you let me know? Because I just love these stories. There's a bridge in Glasgow called the Squinty Bridge. Now, as much as Glasgow City Council try to get everyone to stop calling it the Squinty Bridge and to call it the Glasgow Arc, it'll never be called the Glasgow Arc. Everybody just knows it as the Squinty Bridge. It cost 20 million, this bridge. And don't get me wrong, when it's lit up, it looks lovely. It goes right over the River Clyde, which is the huge river that runs right through Glasgow. It connects to very, very different parts of Glasgow City, and you know, that was kind of its purpose. But 20 million and 5 years to build this thing. And when they finally unveiled it, when you look at it, you're like, why is it squint? It's not straight. It's got this weird bend in it. And so it just became the Squinty Bridge. I love things like that, but I don't understand how they happen. I don't understand how you can have that many people involved in something for it then to be like, we've ever so slightly fucked this up. Yeah, we haven't actually really measured things properly. Oh, I don't know how it happens. But anyway, please do send me these things. Okay, so back to the memorial. They're thinking, well, what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do now? Because we've built this and we can't put him in it. So the idea is this. Move him into a smaller coffin. He's been dead for 8 years now, and he's about to be removed from one coffin into another. So that happens, and he finally gets put into the memorial that was built for him. Is that the end of the story of what happened to Abraham Lincoln's body? No, it's not. Let's journey over to a prison cell miles away from Springfield. There is a man sitting in prison called Ben Boyd. Who's he then? Well, Ben Boyd is famous for being known at the time as America's greatest counterfeiter. He basically printed money, or whatever the early version of printing money was. He was the best. He could fake dollar bills like nobody else. But the problem was, Ben Boyd had been caught doing this and was in jail. Now, Ben Boyd's gang of mates, his crew, his gang of criminals, they didn't want him in prison. They wanted him out. They needed him to be out and be making those counterfeit bills. You know, that was what was going to keep their criminal racket going. So the leader of this criminal gang, a man called Big Jim. Big Jim comes up with a plan, and it's this. He tells his gang of criminals, here's what we're going to do to get Ben Boyd out of jail. We're going to steal the body of Abraham Lincoln, and we're going to hold it to ransom and demand that Ben, the counterfeiter, be released from prison. Great plan. Love it. Honestly, these people that cook up these plans, I'm like, can you hear yourself? Can you... What? You want to steal the body of the president? Sure. Yeah, great. On you go. Yeah. Do you know what? If you're fucking stupid enough to think it's going to happen, then be my guest. On you go. I mean, could they not think of anything or anyone else to steal as ransom? Why not steal a live person? Why this body? Apparently, in their brain, it has to be Lincoln. So, Big Jim makes a mistake. Same mistake you hear about all the time. He starts telling everyone about the plan. I mean, idiot. He just goes around telling people, yeah, we're going to steal the body of Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, great. And we're going to hold it to ransom until the police let our friend out of prison. Idiot. Absolute idiot. So, he hires 2 men who are going to steal the president's body. And the plan is set, and it's this. They're going to break into the vault. They're going to get the body, and they're going to take it miles out of town and temporarily bury it out of sight until they get their pal out of jail. So, Big Jim, he's telling everyone and anyone who'll listen, that this is his master plan. But police quickly hear of the plan. And rather than go to Big Jim straight away and say, look, you've been running around town telling everyone that you're going to steal Abraham Lincoln's body, instead what they do is they decide to put an undercover police officer into Big Jim's gang. So a new gang member arrives, and of course Big Jim is only too happy to tell him all about the plan to creep into the vault within the memorial, get the body, and ransom, blah blah blah. I mean, the whole story is a farce. The whole thing is just a joke. Police are now, of course, watching the gang. They're watching them very closely. And what they want is they want to intercept just as they're stealing the corpse, so that they can actually catch them red-handed. So police station themselves near the memorial. The gang arrive in the middle of the night to steal Lincoln. The gang get in to underneath where the coffin is. They get to Lincoln's coffin and they start to drag it out. Police try to intercept this. It all goes a bit mad for a moment. There's lots of fighting. There's lots of people running about all over the place. The criminals realise the police are there, and a gunshot gets fired and everyone scatters. Not knowing if it's the criminals who've got a gun or the police who've got a gun. Somebody's got a gun and someone's shooting, so everyone runs. This leaves Lincoln's coffin just lying exposed for a few hours with no one watching it. So police have to return and put the coffin back where it should have been. And of course, straight away, police are completely reprimanded for the fact that they left the coffin unattended for hours. And what you now get is 2 major news stories. A, someone tried to steal Abraham Lincoln's body, but B, police left it unattended for hours. So how do we know that this is actually still his body in that coffin? And now a panic sets in, because as the story gets bigger, police start to think, shit, what if actually this is just the first attempt to steal his body, and what if now everybody thinks, hey, if we steal the body of Abraham Lincoln, we could seriously make some money. So this is what they do. They decide they're going to keep it within this memorial area, but they're not actually going to keep it where the coffin should be. Instead, they're going to put a fake coffin in. A fake empty coffin, and they'll move his actual body around from place to place. So sometimes they store it in like weird little rooms within the memorial. They put it into outhouses in nearby fields with police stationed round about. They move it from house to house. And it's just because the news is out there that Abraham Lincoln's body was actually almost taken by criminals. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine what Mary Lincoln at this point must have been thinking? She must have wanted to punch someone in the face at this point. She's like, how can they not guard my dead husband's body? For the next 15 years, Lincoln's body is moved. It does not stay in the one place because people are convinced someone is going to try and steal it And what that means is that for those 15 years, people are making the pilgrimage to come from all over the place to see Abraham Lincoln's coffin, and actually what they're looking at is empty. It's not him. They'd hidden him elsewhere. They were just telling people, this is what it is. God, what a mess. By now, rumours are rife that, in fact, Lincoln's body had been swapped out of the coffin, and there was no point in even looking in the Springfield area because his body was miles away in another part of America. And even today, historians and many other people will argue about where Lincoln's body is. And that's an argument for them to have because we won't ever know the truth. Police and the government will say no, in that memorial, that is truly Abraham Lincoln. Others will say bullshit. His body is somewhere in another part being hidden. Doctors will swear in writing that no, this really is his body, and others will say there is no way to tell that that is really him. 30 years later, the memorial needs some work done to it. And by now, Mary is dead, and any Lincoln family members who've died have all been placed in the memorial, in the mausoleum. So, when the repair work needs done, the bodies have to be taken out. They're taken out, they're back to Springfield, they're buried in another place, and for days they are guarded by police. And then they're finally placed back. To this day, right now in 2020, people still debate if that's actually Abraham Lincoln, or in fact, his bones are resting somewhere that we will never know about. And so ends the story. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that one. What a weird little story, but honestly, do you know, since I heard it, I couldn't get it out of my head. I was like, what? That's so weird. Like, obviously, these bodies are sort of well protected, but I think it's just this 1865 vibes of what you should actually do with things like that. I mean, it's so mental for his body to be moved that much. I also just quite like the mystery of where are his actual bones. Okay, right, that was story 2, coming soon. The remaining episodes of the Body and the Brain series. Get in touch. Would be lovely to hear from you. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.